Amazingly, when NWA TNA debuted in June of 2002, they did so without a television deal secured or a regular touring schedule in place, but instead put on weekly pay-per-views. Yes, a pay-per-view every week. And you thought WWE's 14 or so a year was too much. It was a novel business model, but it clearly wasn't sustainable in the long term, and in November of 2004, now that they had a TV deal in place, they presented their first ever monthly pay-per-view. Victory Road was a big night for the company as they sought to show the potential first-time viewers an example of what the company was about with a jam-packed 3-hour special. There were 9 matches on the card, and many of those were multi-person affairs, as the organization clearly tried to include as many talents as possible on this historic event. Looking back, it's a proper eclectic mix of performers who became big stars in the industry, folks who are still active but not working for any major promotion, and others who seemingly disappeared off the face of the earth. And a situation like that sounds like it necessitates the services of expert private investigator Chance Tanner to track them down. When there's a way, there's a chance. Tanner, that is. And we've somehow managed to get info on everyone who appeared at Victory Road 2004. So where the bloody hell are they now? Roll the intro.
Mason Ryan, Stevie Ray, Earthquake, Alundra Blaze, Norman Smiley, Zach Gowen, Bam Bam Bigelow. Ahmed Johnson, Tory Wilson, Buff, Bagwell, Robert Gibson, Dave Taylor, Terry Taylor, and Godfather's Holmes. Dwayne Gill, Adam Bomb, Michael Hayes, Cor Von, S.A. Rios, Jim Manai, the manager from Kai and Tai, Jim Powers, Francine, Jack Swagger, Mean Gene, Fat Chick Thriller, Duke the Dumpster, Oklahoma Manta. What happened to that wrestler? Some were main eventing, which leaves me lamenting. What happened to that wrestler? Some since long forgotten, but their memories live on.
Kazarian. The first match on the show was a 20-man X Division Cup Gauntlet match, which was basically a Royal Rumble until it got down to the final 2, at which point it became a standard match. The first entrant was no longer Frankie Kazarian, and he lasted the full 24-minute duration of the bout before being the final man eliminated. These days, Kazarian is still going strong as a member of the All Elite Wrestling roster, where until recently he teamed with fellow TNA veteran Christopher Daniels as SCU. Sonjay Dutt. Out second was Sonjay Dutt, an exciting prospect who really came on leaps and bounds during his time with TNA. Dutt wrestled with them off and on until 2019 when he left to join WWE as a backstage producer. Puma. Who's the man under the cat mask, you ask? Well, it was a 20-year-old TJ Perkins who, given his lowly status at the time, was unsurprisingly eliminated from the match first. Perkins has wrestled all over the world since, including a spell with WWE in 2016 to 2019, which saw him win the Cruiserweight title. He's back with TNA, or Impact these days, where he competes in the X Division as both TJ Perkins and Manic. LA Park. It's LA Park, aka La Parka, aka the chairman of WCW. The 55-year-old is still wrestling today, doing his things on the indies as well as for AAA in Mexico and MLW in the United States. Jarrell Clark. Okay, we're getting a little obscure now, are we? Jarrell Clark was able to distinguish himself back in the day due to his ability to perform a 630 splash as a finishing move. He hasn't wrestled regularly since the mid-2000s and had his last match in 2019. These days he's married with kids and, last I could tell, worked in a pirate-themed stunt show in Florida. Miyamoto. A graduate of the All Japan Pro Wrestling Dojo, Kazushi Miyamoto made a handful of TNA appearances over the course of the next couple of years and has continued wrestling in Japan, bouncing around various organizations. On March 21st, 2021, Miyamoto had his first professional MMA fight for the Rizin Fighting Federation. It did not go well. He lost the fight via KO in 8 seconds. Michael Shane. The cousin of Shawn Michaels drew lucky number 7 and managed to last a solid 20 minutes before being chucked out. Real name Matt Bentley, he pretty much left the business in the late 2000s and had his last match for GFW in 2015. He now lives in Iowa and plays in a rock band. Hector Garza. The winner of the gauntlet was Hector Garza, a man that TNA had big plans for and wanted to push as their top Latino babyface. Tragically, Garza passed away from lung cancer in 2013. He was just 43 years old. His legacy is continued by his nephews who wrestle for WWE as Angel Garza and Humberto Carrillo. Nosawa. Also in the gauntlet match was Nosawa. The Japanese journeyman still wrestles full-time today for groups such as Pro Wrestling Noah. Mikey Batts. Oh, now we're really going down the early days TNA rabbit hole. Mikey Batts was a relative and trainee of Billy Kidman and signed a WWE developmental deal in 2006. It didn't pan out though, and he left the business soon after. He is currently a chief operator for Sperry Rail in New York City. Alex Shelley. One of the greatest and frankly still underrated wrestlers of the last 20 years, Alex Shelley is still involved in the business and wrestles independently as a free agent, including recently for Impact. However, his primary focus is his new career as a physical therapist. Matt Sydal. Another high-flying indie sensation, Matt Sydal was yet to truly break out when he appeared in this match, but caught fire in Ring of Honor soon after, and eventually wound up in WWE, New Japan, and just about everywhere else. He's now signed to All Elite Wrestling. Sonny Siaki. Following his time in TNA, Siaki signed a WWE developmental deal and was in that system for a couple of years before leaving due to family reasons. His brother needed a kidney transplant and Sonny stepped in as the donor. He retired in 2008 after the operation and now raises his daughter and works for UPS. Jason Cross. Jarrell Clark had the 630, Matt Sydal has the Shooting Star Press, and Jason Cross had the Shooting Star Leg Drop, which was his calling card while working for early day TNA. His last matches came in 2017. He is married with children and lives in Georgia. Shark Boy. Shark Boy is getting close to Shark middle-aged man at this point, but he's still around, popping up occasionally on the indies. And you know what? When he's on, he's not just good, he's fantastic. Oh, I'm really sorry. Let's move on. Psychosis. Another standout luchador who made his name in WCW, Psychosis showed up here for one of his last TNA appearances before signing with WWE in 2005. Since then, he's been active and primarily wrestles in Mexico. D-Ray 3000. I don't know what the gimmick is, I don't know what D-Ray 3000's story is, but he's here and he's great, isn't he? He's still active today too, wrestling occasionally on the independent scene under his new gimmick, Rick Baker. Amazing Red. One of the true innovators of the new millennium indie scene, the Amazing Red has been here, there, and everywhere over the last 20 or so years. A former X Division and TNA Tag Team Champion, these days Red is currently the head trainer at the House of Glory Wrestling School, a group he helped found in New York City. Spanky. Better known as Brian Kendrick, or the Brian Kendrick, the 22-year veteran is currently signed to WWE, where he recently competed as a member of the 205 Live roster and now works as a backstage producer. Outside of WWE, he runs his own wrestling school in California. Chris Sabin. The last wrestler in the Gauntlet was one of TNA's true homegrown success stories. Chris Sabin has been in and out of the company since his 2003 debut, but now finds himself back in as a member of the Impact Wrestling roster. Right, we are 20 wrestlers in and we're only on match number 2. Help me. Ron Killings. Oh goody, the next match is a random 8-man tag. It's understandable that TNA would want to get everyone involved for their first ever monthly pay-per-view, especially a standout performer like Ron Killings. These days, Killings is the lovable, ever-present and seemingly ageless R-Truth, and will probably have a job for life with WWE. Outside of the ring, much like myself, he is a rapper. Eric Watts. Wait a second, Cowboy Bill wasn't booking this show, was he? One of wrestling's most unfortunate victims of nepotism, Eric Watts retired from the industry in 2005. He'll still show up at conventions and signings, but these days he works as a regional manager for a credit processing company in Georgia and has his hands full with 5 kids. Johnny B. Bad. Remember Mark Mero's brief TNA comeback in 2004? Of course you don't, but it happened. Mero pretty much retired after this and now works as a motivational speaker, and I'm sure tries his best not to annoy Brock Lesnar at family get-togethers. Pat Kenny. Alias Simon Diamond, Kenny worked for TNA/Impact as a wrestler and then producer until 2017. He is currently a real estate agent and is married with kids. Andy Douglas. The dark-haired half of the Naturals tag team, Andy Douglas left TNA in 2007 and then the business entirely in 2010. He now works as a chiropractor in Nashville, Tennessee. I mean, if I trust anyone to find out what's wrong with my neck and back, it's a former wrestler. Chase Stevens. The blonde half of the Naturals is still actively wrestling and worked for Impact as late as 2020. He is also an actor and makes custom ring gear for his fellow pro wrestlers. Kid Cash. The Kid Rock cosplayer still periodically dons the tights and worked a couple of matches for Impact in 2020. He's unsuccessfully dabbled in MMA in recent years and can still be found on the convention/signing circuit, as well as doing training seminars. Dallas. He might have looked like a green test ripoff back then, but Dallas turned out darn good in the end, I'd say. He's been wrestling ever since and is currently signed to All Elite Wrestling, where he performs as Lance Archer. Mascarita Sagrada. You what? You didn't think TNA were gonna have their first proper pay-per-view without a minis match, did you? At least they drafted in one of the best minis ever in the form of the mysterious Mascarita Sagrada. Not much is known about him since he's never given his real name or unmasked, but he last wrestled in 2019. Given his height, charisma, and athleticism, I reckon he moonlights as Tom Cruise. Piratita Morgan. Sagrada's pint-sized pirate opponent, who had previously worked for WCW and in WWE as Battalion, sadly passed away in 2018 after experiencing health problems. He was 49 years old. BG James. Oh, you didn't know? The former Road Dogg tagged with 3 Live crew partner Conan to successfully challenge for the NWA tag team titles on the show. After TNA, James managed to mend fences with WWE once again and returned to the company first as a performer before transitioning into multiple backstage roles. Something of a utility player, he's currently working at the WWE Performance Center and helps run the NXT brand. Conan. For most wrestling fans, Conan is still relevant as the voice of the popular Keepin' It 100 podcast. He still has connections to the business and is involved in various capacities. He also survived a near-fatal health scare in early 2021. Eric Young. Young has been one of TNA/Impact's top workhorses over the years. Besides a break between 2016 and 2020 when he worked for WWE, he's always been there and is wrestling for them to this day, though he suffered a setback in early 2021 when he injured his ACL. Bobby Roode. Young's tag team partner Bobby Roode also distinguished himself as one of TNA's hardest workers. He became a top star and world champion before making the jump to WWE in 2015. And he's been successful there too, winning the NXT title, as well as United States and Tag Team Gold. Scott D'Amore. Team Canada's manager is one of the most influential people behind the scenes in today's Impact Wrestling, working as executive vice president. Roddy Piper. I mean, if I was trying to market myself as a hip new product and an alternative to WWE, I'm not sure I would be rehashing one of their famous angles from 20 years ago, but hey, whatever. The Rowdy Scott was on hand to host a Piper's Pit with Jimmy Snuka, and you can bet your kilt there was a coconut involved. Piper was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2005 and spent the following 10 years working for WWE on and off. He sadly passed away in 2015 at the age of 61. Jimmy Snuka. Snuka passed away not too long after Piper in January 2017. He had been in poor health for a while and at the time of his death was facing scrutiny for his role in the 1983 death of his girlfriend Nancy Argentino. He was ultimately declared not mentally fit to stand trial and the charges were dismissed weeks before his passing. Trinity. The next part of TNA's variety show was a very short women's match between Trinity and Jacqueline. Trinity left TNA and signed with WWE in 2006, but left after a short run on the ECW brand. She retired from the business and has since gone back to stunt work, including in some major Hollywood films and for TV. She is also married and has a son. Glenn Gilberti. Accompanying Trinity to ringside was WCW's Disco Inferno. You can still hear his controversial views on wrestling via the Keepin' It 100 podcast. Johnny Swinger. Also accompanying Trinity was Johnny Swinger, the ECW alumni who bounced around on the indie scene for years before returning to Impact properly in 2019. He has been a very entertaining part of the show since. Jacqueline. Jacqueline did the favors here and returned to the company in 2007, where she became the manager of Beer Money and competed in the Knockouts division. She left in 2013 and disappeared from the business, returning to be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2016 and working her to date last match as an entrant in the first Women's Royal Rumble match in 2018. Monty Brown. More variety next, with a triple threat Monsters Ball match between three of TNA's standouts. Former NFL player Monty Brown could have been a much bigger star, and maybe would have, had he not left the business after a year on WWE's books in mid-2007 in order to deal with a family matter. Since then, he's shown up here and there, but hasn't wrestled since. He has his own fitness company, Alpha One Fitness, and was recently involved in training police academy prospects in his home state of Michigan. Raven. Alright, so what about Raven? The former ECW, WCW, and WWE star is another member of the podcast club, hosting the Raven Effect show on the MLW radio network. He also tried to sue WWE on numerous occasions over the years, mostly due to the language of their contracts. Abyss. Perhaps no TNA wrestler suffered for the cause more than Abyss. The maniacal masked man shed gallons of blood, sweat, and tears during his 17 years with the company and was rightly inducted into their Hall of Fame in 2018. A few months later, however, he left and now works for WWE as a backstage producer. He briefly appeared on screen in a storyline with AJ Styles under his old Joseph Parks gimmick. P.T. Williams. The X Division champion and originator of the Canadian Destroyer still works for Impact as a producer and occasional wrestler. AJ Styles. The Phenomenal One was unsuccessful in his pursuit of PT's title, but that didn't slow him down much. AJ was TNA's MVP for years and years before finally leaving in 2014 and signing with New Japan. He's been with WWE since 2016 and is still one of the best wrestlers in the business. James Storm. Another TNA stalwart, James Storm has seen and done it all in the company. The Tennessee Cowboy is still with Impact Wrestling as of this recording. Chris Harris. Proving that the grass isn't always greener on the other side, Chris Harris's career was basically torpedoed thanks to his lame duck run as Braden Walker on WWE's revamped ECW. He was due to return to TNA for one night in 2020 for their reunion show before COVID put a stop to plans. The Wildcat tends to keep a low profile now, but he's still involved in training talent at his local wrestling school and finally came back to TNA in March of 2021 as part of a storyline with his old partner. Elix Skipper. Primetime could usually be relied upon for a move or two for the highlight reel, though his performance here was hampered after he suffered a concussion. The former WCW man disappeared from wrestling in 2009 and currently manages an Applebee's in Georgia. Christopher Daniels. Skipper's partner, Christopher Daniels, on the other hand, has been in the wrestling business for decades now and is still bending bones in his 50s. Or is he? Jeff Jarrett. And now the main event, which naturally means Jeff Jarrett defending and retaining the NWA World's title. Double J was an important figure in TNA for many years, whether as one of its top stars or in his various backstage roles. Some thought he would never leave, but then he did, and he's now back working for WWE as a producer. He was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2017. Jeff Hardy. The Chosen One's opponent in this ladder match was Jeff Hardy, a man looking to rebuild his career and reputation after leaving WWE due to his personal demons a year before. The charismatic enigma has had many ups and some terrible downs since, but the surefire future Hall of Famer is back on the WWE roster. He's also married with kids, plays in a rock band, and does some doodles. Scott Hall. The main event was not without its extras, because as well as ladders, both Jeffs had a member of the Outsiders in their corner. The bad guy who seconded Jarrett is now retired and concentrating his efforts on remaining clean and sober. You can still see him on the convention and signing circuit. He was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2014 and as a member of the NWO in 2020. Kevin Nash. Hall's buddy Nash accompanied Hardy and ended up turning on him at the match's conclusion. Big Daddy Cool is also retired and can usually be found hanging around with Hall and other NWO members like Sean Waltman at signings. He was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2015 and as a member of the NWO in 2020. Randy Savage. The company's big surprise to end the pay-per-view was the first televised appearance of Macho Man Randy Savage in over 4 years. TNA had long wanted to work with Savage and finally got their wish, though his stay was short and erratic. He almost got into a backstage fight with a visiting Hulk Hogan at this show. After his TNA time came to an end, Randy basically withdrew from the public eye and did voice work for films and TV. He passed away in 2011 at the age of 58 and was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2015.